You're tuned in to the Retro FM podcast.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm the Ferg,
I'm Lando.
and welcome to the Retro FM podcast, and thank you for listening. Ferg, why do you call it the Retro FM podcast? Tell you what, Lando, why don't you take it away?
We came up with the name, Ferg and I came up with the name Retro FM Podcast because, one, we grew up on FM radio. It was the predominant place where we heard our music. I know Ferg is a little older than I am. He grew up in the era of CDs and cassette
Absolutely.
tapes.
Yep, sure did.
I'd like to say I had iPods, which I did. I had iPod and this, but I listened to a lot of the radio, regardless of the fact that I had that. I had a lot of CDs. In fact, when I got my first vehicle and was riding around, I had burnt CDs that I had burned and played. So we picked that FM part, and the retro comes from the fact that we love older music. Not to say we don't like newer music, but
And that's not to say that we're not going to feature newer music in the
Exactly.
podcast. There's some great new bands out there and great new up and coming bands. However,
it's the fact that the radio doesn't play some of the best of the older music that you will hear. And if you want to hear it, you've got to go on the album and find the song and play it. And that doesn't happen nowadays. In the era of Spotify and Pandora and YouTube and quick access to whatever song you want to hear, it's here and it's there and it's right now. Whereas back then you had to listen to the entire album, and so you got the whole experience, and you knew that, okay, yeah, sure, this song's on the radio a lot, but this song I enjoy a whole lot better. So it's almost a unsung hero or a deep dive here, and that's what we want to bring to you guys. We want to bring to you guys those songs that you may not have known about, or those albums you may not have known about. And not just albums. We're going to do a plethora of other things. We're going to do top 10 lists, and we're going to do interviews and all kinds of stuff. But just to give you an idea of what we're about, that's where that name comes from, and that's what we're about.
we're passionate about music, and we're passionate about some of the same music that you guys love and you've loved for years and years, and we're passionate about new and up and coming music. But the thing of it is our passion has led us to push beyond the boundaries of just what you hear on FM radio. You say, well, FM radio is outdated. Not really, because I'll tell you one thing, Lando, for 10 and a half years, I worked on a home restoration crew. In other words, home construction. And almost every day, those guys go to work, and the only way to get through our day and keep us going, man, is to crank up that radio and see what was on. And granted, there's some great songs out there, new and old, and all kinds of stuff. But what we want to do for you guys, we want to give you guys ideas and inspire you to look and dig and find these golden nuggets that you've never found before or that you never knew were out there.
Exactly.
And we don't want to be cliche, but on our very first episode, we want to talk about probably one of the largest, one of the biggest, one of the hugest, one of the greatest,
in my opinion, the greatest rock band of all time.
definitely on the Mount Rushmore of all-time rock and roll heavy metal bands. And you guys have probably already guessed who it is. We're starting with none other than Led Zeppelin. Oh, yeah, you heard me right. Led Zeppelin. You said, Ferg, why are you and Lando starting with Led Zeppelin? God, we've heard them for years and years. They still play them everywhere. I'll tell you why. Because on February 7th this year, 2025, there is a monumental event that has never happened in the history of all rock and roll, heavy metal, and in the history of music. Lando, won't you tell them what that event is?
February the 7th, 2025. Hitting IMAX theaters across the nation is the first and only band-authorized documentary about Led Zeppelin. If you know anything about Led Zeppelin, you know that they are notorious for not letting people use their music. Notorious. In fact, when I was growing up, I would watch School of Rock all the time. In fact, it was either School of Rock or Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah.
That was in the DVD player. Well, if you go to the extras menu on, on the School of Rock DVD, you'll find a clip of Jack Black and the cast and the extras that are all gathered around, and they're begging Led Zeppelin to
Oh
let
yeah,
them
yeah,
use
yeah. I
Immigrant
remember
Song
that.
for that movie. And which, of course, Zeppelin let them use it. They're in the van, they're jamming out to Immigrant Song,
Thankfully.
but they're notorious. So the fact that we're getting a band authorized documentary is unbelievable, and I'm just glad that I'm alive to see it, and I cannot wait. And Ferg and I are going to go watch this documentary. We're going to come back to you guys and give you a rundown and a review of this documentary when it hits theaters. But like Ferg said, it's music history right here, and so we had to start with Zeppelin because it's right here on the precipice of this.
This is unprecedented, and so we thought, what better place and what better time to start? And speaking of starting, Lando, you mentioned that they were your favorite band of
All
all time.
time.
That you put them up there at the top, which a lot of our listeners do. A lot of our listeners put them up there. But here's the thing: you talk about starters. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a starting point. Where did you start with Led Zeppelin in your life? How did they influence you? How did they influence your love for music? How'd you get started with them? Like where did you fall in love with them, and what brought you to them being your greatest and most favorite band?
So growing up, my musical influence came from my parents. My mom was the 80s and the 90s, the hair metal, your ACDCs, which they're not hair metal, but she loved
Right.
ACDC, your Def Leppards, the Poison, Motley
Oh
Crue,
yeah,
all
all of
these
them are
guys,
great. Yeah.
Skid Row.
Ooh,
She
yeah.
loved all those. And my dad was country, and he was blues, and
Uh
he was
huh.
the golden oldies. I got Ronnie Millsap and Elvis Presley and Jerry Reed and
Oh
all these
yeah.
guys, Roy Clark from my dad. I grew up watching Hee Haw with my dad, and depending on whose car I was in, it was either Def Leppard, or it was Johnny Cash, or it was Motley Crue, or it
Uh
was
huh.
Elvis Presley. And not to say my parents are still together, by the way, not they're not separated. God bless my parents; they've been together for what is it, 32 years this year.
Bro, that's a
Love my
blessing.
parents to death.
That's a blessing.
Shout out to them. But that's where my music comes from. So I was always listening to music all the time, whether or not I had headphones in. There was a there was a clock radio in the bathroom when I took a shower. I had the radio
Okay.
on,
The old clock right
and
there.
so some of your rock staples were Zeppelin, Black Dog, rock and roll, a whole lot of love. Well, at the same time, you also had your Billy Squire, your Lonely
Mm-hmm.
is the Night, Everybody Wants
Love
You,
Billy Squire.
and so, if you notice, Billy Squire and Martin Plant have a very similar voice. So, for the longest time growing up, I just figured they were the same band. Like, they did the same songs. And I was under that impression. Nobody ever told me any different. And so, it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 years old, I was in theater, which I grew up doing theater. I did about 35
Oh
productions
wow.
while I
Okay.
was in school up until I graduated. We were doing The Hobbit one summer, and I was 12 or 13 years old. And these two guys come on stage who were in the cast for our opening night, and they say, "Hey, we're gonna play this song for you by a band called Led Zeppelin. The song is Ramble On. It's got ties to Lord of the Rings. We're doing The Hobbit. I'm gonna play this song for you." And so they get up here and they do Ramble On, and I'm listening backstage, and I'm like, "Man, this is a great song." I was like, "I want to hear what the original sounds like." So when we get done that night, I go home and I look up Ramble On, and I listen to it, and it just blows me away. I'm like, "Wow, this is amazing." It's like the musicianship is awesome, and it's tying into Lord of the Rings. I was like, what else do these guys have to offer? And so I just delved right into the catalog of music. And I'd already been playing guitar for about a year and a half, 2 years already, and this just propelled me even further because I'd heard ACDC play, and I'd heard of those other guys, but when I heard Jimmy Page do to a guitar what he did,
Absolutely.
it was unbelievable. I was like, man, I want to be able to do that.
Right.
So it just propelled me further into my musicianship, and I was just blown away. And to this day, there's not another artist besides I think Elvis and Led Zeppelin are the only two artists that I can sit down, hit play, and never skip a song.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Merle Haggard may be the only other one.
And a lot of you, have bands that are your favorites, and just about all of us can find a song to skip even out of our favorite bands, there's guys that we're like, I love these guys, but there's that one song you're like, I'm not gonna listen to that.
So and that was it. Growing up, it was Led Zeppelin or nothing, and so it was an awakening for me to hear these guys and the innovation that they had. In fact, I was watching the Kennedy Center Honors for Led Zeppelin. I think it was 2012 is when they had their Kennedy Center Honors,
Okay, I think you're right.
and I was watching. And if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. I may be wrong. I'm looking back here, but I was watching, and Jack Black is hosting, and he's talking about the pilgrimage, and I'm like, man, what is the pilgrimage? And he says it's sitting down listening to every Zeppelin album consecutively in one sitting, which is 9 albums consecutively back to back. It's like 6.5 hours.
Wow, I mean that's an
So
undertaking right there. Wow.
one of my best friends, who's still one of my best friends, in fact, he's a member of this podcast, Scarby. He makes the magic happen behind the scenes. Shout
He
out
sure
to him.
does. A big shout out, and you guys should appreciate him. He's making a lot happen here for us.
I go to him sophomore year of high school, and I'm like, Scarby, we gotta sit down and do this pilgrimage. And we share a very similar taste of music. He's a little heavier than I am. He likes Gojira and Megadeth and these guys. And I'm like, but predominantly the same taste of music. And I say, we got to sit down and listen to this. He's like, all right, yeah, I'm in. Okay. He's like, my parents are out of town for fall break. Come over one day and we'll sit down and we'll do it. I'm like, cool. So we write it out. We figure out it's like 6.5 hours of nonstop Led Zeppelin. So I go over there. We hook his big Line 6 amp up to this radio. We take my
amp.
Yeah, yeah. We take my iPod, and it didn't have Bluetooth capability. We take my iPod and we hook it up to the aux. He's passing the aux. We hook it up to the aux, and I've already got the playlist set out. It's every album back to back to back, and we sit down and we listen to every album back to back. That was one of my favorite memories, and I've actually got a video of that day, and I'm wearing this T-shirt, which brings me to another story I've got all kind of stories about Zeppelin, but I'm wearing this T-shirt, and it's tie dye, and it says Led Zeppelin U.S. Tour 1977. But right in the middle of all that is their label, which is this angel. That's its arms are spread, its wings are spread, and
Robert Plant's flowing
hair, the hair and everything. Yeah. I'm wearing this T-shirt, and I think my parents had gotten it for me for Christmas, for our birthday or whatever. Well, I couldn't wear it to a lot of places because most of the places I was at was either at school or I was at home doing homework. If we go out, there wasn't a lot to do around the town I grew up. It was either go to Walmart and walk around or go to Sonic and hang out. That was about it. And so we had a dress code at the high school that I went to, and every now and again we get a dress down day. We get to wear jeans or a T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those days comes around. I'm like, well, I'm wearing my Zeppelin T-shirt. I got to rep my band. So I walk in. Day goes fine up until about third period. I walk into class. Teacher's like, you can't wear that. I'm like, why not? It's an angel. There's nothing's going on. There's no male or female parts. It's just an angel, wings spread, arms wide open. She's like, yeah, you can't wear it. She's like, I gotta send you to the principal's office. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. So of course she calls ahead and tells him I'm on the way. Well, I walk into the principal's office, and he turns around in his chair. He's like, "So that's a good album." And I knew what he. Obviously, it's not an album, but I knew what he meant. It's their label, Swan Song. He's like, I've got the album at the house. He's like, I love Led Zeppelin. Just you can't wear the T-shirt. I'm like, well, okay, whatever. So I think Mom and Dad had to come bring me another T-shirt to wear. But just one of those many stories I've got on Led Zeppelin. I've got so many.
Well, one thing you mentioned in your story was talking about how that when you got into Led Zeppelin, it had a lot to do with your involvement with the play. It had the Lord of the Rings, and the
theater,
Hobbit.
Yeah, there was the Hobbit
theater, and you guys were doing the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and theater. And one of the interesting facts about Led Zeppelin is on their fourth album, the only time that Robert Plant ever invited another vocalist to come in and accompany him on a song was on their fourth album, and it just so happened to be a song titled "The Battle of Evermore." He brought in Sandy Denny, who had formerly been in Fairport
Convention.
Convention.
Yes, that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. A great folk singer, wonderful folk singer, even put out 4 solo albums of her own, but she was invited in. And that particular song, Battle of Evermore,
Yep.
that is about the Lord of the Rings.
It is the third. Tell you how big of a Zeppelin I am. It's the third song on their fourth album, Battle. It's right after Black Dog and Rock and Roll, but it's actually my favorite song from the album. And you're absolutely right. The Battle of Evermore is about. It mentions the ring wraiths. It and if you haven't heard the song, go and listen to it. It's a lengthier song from them. Obviously, it clocks in at like 6 minutes, I think, which is like rookie play,
Right.
according, like when you
Right.
get to
According
stuff.
to them, right.
But it's a great song. Go listen to it. It's got images of Lord of the Rings and John Paul Jones mandolin playing on that song, which is amazing.
And that's the thing about artists like John Paul Jones. Sometimes we make the mistake of putting an artist in a box of thinking that, whatever instrument they
He's the bassist.
right,
Air quotes, he's the bassist.
right, and oftentimes they're multi-talented,
Absolutely.
and he's
or
absolutely multi-talented.
organ and piano and bass and mandolin on that song. Uh, yeah, it's unbelievable how talented each of the members of that band were. It's and you know when you mention super groups, you think, okay, well these are people who have been in bands before who are big. Like the Traveling Wilburys. That was we consider a super group. Zeppelin's a super band, if you want to put a label on it, because each and every member is in their own right a fantastic and extraordinary musician.
Absolutely.
And the way that they come together as a cohesive unit and they melded together and their chemistry together was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Right.
And most of you listening probably feel like you already know this and you're probably familiar with a lot of their catalog, but the truth of it is, because not a lot of it got played on the radio. Well, quite a bit of it did get played on the radio, but there's a lot of it left out there that didn't.
Oh,
there's a lot that
did
it. And in the era where people are seeing vinyl make a comeback, people
Yes.
are buying albums and records again. But there was a day and time when that's what you did. You bought an album, you bought a record, and you sat down and you listened to the entire record.
Yes.
And it wasn't as easy to skip.
Right.
As it is nowadays, and just go on.
I'm a big vinyl collector. I love vinyl. And in fact, you mentioned that a lot of the songs that they have didn't get radio play. The only song from their sixth studio album, Physical Graffiti, the only song I believe to get radio play was Kashmir. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments in here, but Kashmir was the only song, and there's so many other songs. The Custard Pie. So many great
with Custard Pie is wonderful.
Down by the Seaside, one of my top 5 songs, and I might be pronouncing this wrong, is Bronyar. It's named after the cottage that Plant and Page went to write some songs there when they had their off time.
They kind of made a retreat. Yeah, they'd go there and they would get
many songs that don't get radio play or on that one album alone. My favorite studio album from them is Houses of the Holy. You've got the Rain Song, which is
Crunch.
Oh, the Crunch. Oh. What is that Confounded Bridge? It's my favorite part of that song at the very end.
That's a fantastic line.
The Rain Song, and of course, everybody knows Dire Maker and Over the Hills and Far Away. But taking out the factor of studio songs or studio albums,
right?
My favorite all-time album is the soundtrack for The Song Remains the Same, which was a movie that came out in 1976, which was a compilation of 3 concerts from 1973 at Madison Square Garden. And they released the movie, and then they released the soundtrack album. And I've got it on vinyl. And a funny story about this.
I was going to say, you've got a personal story about that album, don't you?
So my local thrift shop had come out one day, and I've been looking for this album because I'm a big vinyl collector. I've been looking for this album specifically, and they posted on there that they had this specific album original, and it would be at the store. And so I messaged the store. I was like, hey, when I get off work, I'm gonna be right there. First thing, I'm getting that album. So as soon as I get off work, I go to the store, walk in, and the guy's like, man, I just sold it to some kid. He's gonna hang it on his wall. Like he's gonna hang it on his wall. What are you talking about? I was like, that's gotta be played. That's one of those albums you gotta play. You gotta listen to. You got to turn all the lights off and just lay back and let it talk to you. And I'm so mad. And this was in the middle of the summer, right before my birthday, and I was so mad. Well, a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week goes by, or 2 weeks, and my girlfriend at the time was fixing to give me my birthday present, and I have no idea what it is. And so we're hanging out. And she's like, "Hey, I got your present." So I was like, "Okay." Open it up. It's that album.
Oh
And
man!
she was
Oh
the
wow! Wow!
air quote, she was the kid that
Oh,
went up
okay.
and bought the album. She went and bought the album and told the owner to let me know that some kid had bought it, just so it would throw me off her scent. But I ended up getting the album anyway. It's fantastic. If you guys get a chance to listen to it, my favorite song probably off there is a live version of No Quarter. And if you get a chance, in fact, I'm not sure what streaming service you can watch it on, but go watch the movie itself. There's a scene where they're playing No Quarter, and Plant sings the lyric, the dogs of doom are howling low,
Oh,
and Page leans his hands over to the theremin and it makes the howling sound. It's awesome. I wish I could have seen them live. Them and Elvis Presley are like the two concerts that I wish that I could see live, but unfortunately, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But
so many other great songs from so many of the other albums. You know,
wow.
In the Light,
Oh, great. Into the
Tangerine.
Outdoor.
In
Yeah,
yeah,
Into the Light is
yeah.
No, that's on Physical Graffiti.
That's on Physical
Yeah.
Graffiti. Yeah.
Tangerine's a great song. That's on Zeppelin 3, and which was kind of almost a real kind of folky album. Of course, it starts off with the heavy hitter Immigrant Song,
Right.
but then it delves into songs like Gallows Pole and Tangerine, and a lot of this Celtic kind of folk stuff. People weren't sure what to think about it when it come out, but of course, it's Zeppelin. It sold.
Right.
No matter what the critics thought, it sold.
Right. And that's something we wanted to encourage you guys about, was to do your own deep dives. Like we said, nowadays you've got the internet at your fingertips. There's no excuse not to go and look at some of these wonderful, wonderful songs. And you may like them, you may not like them, but one thing that we know for sure, Zeppelin's not going anywhere, brother.
Absolutely
They're not. I mean, I don't care if
Absolutely
you're on
not.
brand new, the newest of heavy metal radio stations or classic rock. I don't care. You're going to hear them each and every day. And you had to hear us talking about them today, because in just about a month's time, like I said, that historical event,
Yes.
we've never seen anything like
have it,
this.
and we're going to give a review for that when that comes out.
Absolutely.
We're
We
gonna
want
go
to do
see
that for you guys. We hope you get to go see it, but we want to do that review.
Hey, and I told my story about Led Zeppelin. If you've got a story about Zeppelin, leave it in the comments. Let us know what you think, or tell us what your favorite song is from Zeppelin.
Your favorite album.
Put it in the comments. Interact. We're here for you guys.
Anybody else have a T-shirt experience?
Exactly. Exactly. I've got all kind of experiences when it comes to Zeppelin, but just let us know in the comments if you've got a story or a favorite song or a favorite album or something that it reminds you of, or maybe you hear a song and it takes you back to a time in life where things were just simpler and all you had was the music. Let us know in the comments. And I want to leave you guys with this. I want to give you 3 songs that you may not have heard before from Zeppelin, and I want you guys, if you take a chance to go listen to them. One of them I've already mentioned, The Battle of Evermore. The third song on Zeppelin 4, go listen to that song. Wonderful song. If you're into drum solos, those drummers out there of you, go listen to John Bonham's drum solo on Led Zeppelin 2. It is called Moby Dick. Mm-hmm. You go hear it. It will blow your socks off. And then go listen to Braun Yor. It's a completely instrumental song on Physical Graffiti. It's a guitar. It's beautiful. Whenever I need to just calm myself down, I'll go and listen to this song, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But those are the 3 songs I want you guys to go check out if you haven't heard them yet. And go after that. Go past that. Go check out, if you like those, go check out the rest of their catalog. But I've been Lando.
And I've been the Ferg. And this has been the Retro FM Podcast. Thanks for listening.